Okay, imagine like Oprah being told she's not fit for television.
Oh, wow.
Or like J.K. Rowling, getting like 12 rejection letters for Harry Potter.
Yeah.
Sounds crazy, right?
Okay.
But rejection, it's like a universal experience, even for those wildly successful people.
Absolutely.
And so today, we're going to do a deep dive into like how to face those setbacks, especially, when you're job searching.
Yeah, that can be a really tough time.
For sure.
And we've got a really interesting podcast episode that we're going to be pulling from today called Staying Resilient Through Rejection and Uncertainty. It's got a ton of information, but we're going to be focusing on, like, the stuff you can actually use.
Right, the practical stuff.
Exactly.
So the episode, like, it jumps right in and it talks about how rejection, statistically, it's totally normal in a job search. Like, they even mention that the average person applies to over 60 jobs before they land one.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize it was that many.
Yeah, so it's, like, not really about you as a person. It's just the numbers game.
Right. It's more about finding the right fit, not your worth as a person.
Exactly, yeah.
And that's where this idea of rejection as feedback comes in.
I'm curious about that. I mean, it sounds good, like, in theory, but how do you actually shift your mindset to see rejection as like a good thing, especially when you're feeling down?
Yeah, I get that. It's definitely a challenge. But the key is to focus on what you can learn. Like each rejection, it's a chance to gather information and figure out how to improve.
So instead of focusing on the no, you're looking for the why.
Exactly.
That makes sense, but it still seems, kind of tough to actually do that.
Oh, for sure. It takes effort.
Yeah.
And the episode has this great case study that shows how this can work. It's about this recent computer science grad named Priya who was having like a really hard time finding a job in tech.
Okay, Priya's story, that sounds pretty relatable, I think. What happened to her?
Well, she sent out something like 50 applications in her first month and like nothing. Most of them she didn't even hear back. And the few interviews she got like all ended in rejections.
Oof, 50 applications and no luck.
Yeah.
That's rough. I could see how that would be really discouraging.
Definitely.
So how did she bounce back from that? Did she just like keep sending out applications and hope for the best?
Well, actually, that's where her story kind of takes a turn. And instead of just, sending out more applications, she decided to be like more proactive. She reached out to some of those companies that rejected her and asked them for feedback.
Wow. That's pretty bold. I mean, did they actually respond?
Some did, some didn't, but the ones that did, it was like really helpful. Some of them mentioned that her resume, even though it was like impressive, it didn't really have the specific skills that they were looking for. And others said she should, change her cover letter to show like how much she cared about their company's, mission.
So she was basically using the rejections to make her application better.
Right, exactly.
Turning a negative into a positive, which kind of goes back to that whole rejection as feedback idea.
Yeah, totally. And the episode, it really emphasizes that even if only a few companies get back to you, that feedback can be like super valuable.
Right.
It can help you see those things that you're missing, about yourself or how you're coming across in an interview.
Right. You're so in your own head, you might not might not even notice that.
Exactly.
So Priya, she took that feedback and used it to kind of like revamp her job search, right? But did she just focus on fixing up her resume and cover letter, or was there more to it?
She did that, but she also did more. You know how some of the companies felt like her resume wasn't really matching up with their needs.
Yeah.
Well, Priya started tailoring her resume and her cover letter for each application, like highlighting the skills that were most relevant to that specific job.
That makes a lot of sense. So instead of just using like the same thing for every job, she was being more strategic, right? More specific.
Right.
But I bet that takes a lot of like time and effort.
It does. But the podcast, it says it's totally worth it.
Okay.
Think about it from the hiring manager's point of view. They're looking at like tons of applications. A resume that's tailored, that shows you really get the job and you have the right skills, that's way more likely to get their attention.
Yeah, you're speaking their language, right?
Exactly.
Showing them that you've really done your research. And I bet that made her stand out.
It did. And her story also shows how important networking is, Priya didn't just rely on those online applications. She
Right.
went to industry events and joined online communities and connected with people on LinkedIn.
So she was really putting herself out there even after those
Right.
rejections. That must have taken like a lot of courage.
It did, but the podcast makes this point that networking is about more than just getting a job.
Oh,
It's about, meeting people and learning from others in your field and expanding your network.
right.
You never know, where those relationships might lead. And in Priya's case, one of her LinkedIn connections that led to an internship, which then turned into a full-time job as a junior developer.
Wow. So all that hard work and networking, it really paid off. Priya's story is super inspiring, and it shows how, reframing rejection as feedback can actually work. But the episode, it doesn't just tell like stories.
Right.
It also has this this practical exercise to help listeners like reframe rejection in their own lives.
Yes.
And I think this is something that everyone can benefit from, even if they're not, job searching.
Oh, for sure. It's this simple but powerful exercise designed to help you shift your perspective and learn from setbacks. It basically encourages you to think about like a recent rejection and figure out what you can do differently next time.
Okay, so let's walk our listener through this exercise. Think about a recent rejection that you're still kind of thinking about. It could be, a job application, a declined pitch, or even like a personal setback. Got it. Now think a little deeper. What did you learn about yourself? Did it show you like a skill you need to work on, or maybe it showed you that your expectations didn't really match up with reality?
And then the key question, what's one thing you could do differently next time based on what you've learned? Maybe it's taking a class to get better at something, or changing how you communicate, or finding a mentor who can give you some guidance. The point is to turn that rejection into like a step forward.
Yeah, it's about taking control and not letting the rejection define you. Now, the source material, it mostly talks about individual resilience, which is obviously really important. But I think it's also important to acknowledge that, job searching and life in general, it's not always fair. There are things that can happen that are totally out of our control.
Yeah, that's a really important point. We can control our own mindset and actions, but sometimes there are things like a bad economy or changes in industries or biases in certain fields that can make things really hard, and there's nothing we can do about that.
So it's great to be resilient and proactive, but we also have to remember that, the world isn't always perfect. And we should be working to make things more fair for everyone.
Definitely. Individual resilience is super important, but we should also be trying to fix the root causes of these problems and make a system where everyone has equal opportunities.
Wow, we've covered a lot about resilience in the job search.
We have. It's been pretty insightful.
Yeah, and I think one of the big takeaways is that rejection, it's not the end of the world.
Right. It's not a failure.
Yeah, it's more like a chance to rethink things and try again.
A stepping stone.
Exactly. And Priya's story, it's a perfect example of that, right?
It is. I mean, she had those setbacks that probably felt huge at the time.
Yeah.
But she ended up in a great place.
Exactly. And it's because she was proactive, right?
Yeah.
She asked for feedback. She really tailored those applications.
Yeah.
And she put in the work to network.
Right. And that's something we can all do. We might not always get the outcome we want,
For sure.
but we can control how we react to it.
Absolutely. And that's really what resilience is all about. And we also talked about how, sometimes things are just out of our hands.
Right. Those external factors that we can't always control.
Yeah. And it's important to be aware of those bigger issues.
It is. It helps us push for change while still focusing on what we can control. Our own attitude, our actions, keep going.
Exactly. So as we wrap up, I'd love to hear like your final thoughts. What's the most important thing you want our listeners to take away from this deep dive?
I'd say the most important thing is to remember that rejection, it doesn't define you. It doesn't mean you're not good enough.
Yeah.
It's an opportunity to learn and grow and come back even stronger. And that's something to keep in mind, not just when you're job searching,
Right.
but in every part of your life. Use that rejection as feedback mindset. It can really change your perspective and help you handle those tough times.
Great advice.
Thanks.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. We hope you found this exploration of resilience insightful and maybe even a little inspiring.
We did too.
Remember, setbacks are a part of life, but it's how we bounce back that truly defines us. So keep learning, keep growing, and most importantly, keep going.
Yeah.
Until next time.